Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Megan Dunn, and I am the Snohomish County Council member for District 2 and Chair of the County Council, and it is my pleasure to be here with you all today. I have the honor of hosting United Way of Snohomish County's virtual conversation, the second in a series of Getting to the Core. Today, our topic is hot, affordable housing in Snohomish County, and we'll start today with a land acknowledgement. United Way of Snohomish County would like to acknowledge that we occupy the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, in particular the Tulalip, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Soxwottle tribes. We see you, respect your right to sovereignty and self-determination, and are committed to being better listeners, learners, and in lifting Indigenous voices. I am so thankful to be here with you today because affordable housing and the housing crisis are the biggest concerns I hear about from local residents. I was proud to champion the effort to commit local dollars in the form of a 1/10 of 1% sales tax to provide funding for housing and behavioral health services for domestic violence survivors, veterans, low-income residents, and people experiencing homelessness and behavioral health challenges. Just as importantly, we need housing options for people in all stages of life. Those in transition, new homeowners, our elders aging in place, young families, and our children eventually leaving the nest. So, how do we get to the core of this very complicated issue? Our conversation will start with the bigger picture of trends in affordable housing in Snohomish County, and then will bring us through to the unique perspective that United Way of Snohomish County brings to the conversation with their focus on CORE. So, what is CORE? CORE stands for Creating Open Roads to Equity, and it is the collective impact work that United Way of Snohomish County is doing so that families with young children can thrive. With over 100 core partners, United Way of Snohomish County is not only serving the immediate needs of families, but it is centering families in decision-making, identifying barriers, and challenging systems. So here's an outline of our program today. First, we'll hear from Nicole Amor, Chair of the Board of Directors of United Way of Snohomish County. Then our keynote speaker today is Chris Collier, Program Manager of the Alliance for Housing Affordability at Housing Authority of Snohomish County, or HASCO. Housing has been such a hot topic, and Chris has been making the rounds on the speaking circuit in the county, but I don't think any of us are tired from hearing from him. Then we'll dive into the work that our United Way of Snohomish County's Impact and Investment team, led by Molly Faye Cruz, is doing with a group of core collaborative partners, bringing to light the firsthand experiences of possible systemic barriers. Finally, the meat of the program is going to draw heavily from the United Way of Snohomish County's work in North Snohomish County with the NCCC Collaborative, the North Counties Community Collaborative, or NCCC. Chris will stay for a panel discussion where we'll be getting to the core of the experiences of our families with Alan Picard of North Counties Family Services and Mary Wysocki, coordinator for the Core Collaborative North Counties Community Collaborative. United Way of Snohomish County has worked to establish the core collaboratives and is now embarking on the second phase of this work. The next phase of CORE is focused on identifying barriers and finding ways to address them. Today's panel will include a discussion of what we're seeing in Snohomish County. So I'm excited to hear how we can support this work, and we'll have some action items for us to take as well. But first, some housekeeping. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and United Way of Snohomish County's website. So please like, comment, share, retweet, and tag your friends. Use the hashtag UWSC Getting to the Core. We invite you to ask questions throughout the event. Please use the chat to relay your questions to our producers, and we'll get those lined up for the Q&A segment of our program. If you're on Facebook, please make sure to press the play on the video so we can see your questions. We also want to provide a quick plug to donate today for this work, and you can do that at www.uwsc.org. So it's an exciting time for folks to invest or reinvest in our core work. So let's get started. I'm pleased to introduce Nicole Moore, Chair of the Board of Directors at United Way of Snohomish County. Nicole, whose pronouns are she and her, has been roaming the nonprofit circles of Snohomish County for the past decade, planning fun events to connect individuals and businesses with opportunities to thrive. Her passion for nonprofits and community stems from her need as a single mom to create a network and opportunity for her daughter. Nicole serves as several volunteer capacities, including board service on United Way of Snohomish County, leadership launch, Mukilteo team, and she recently joined the board of Everett Community College Foundation. Thank you for sharing your time with us, Nicole.
Thank you, Megan. This event would not be a success without you, so we really appreciate your time. And speaking of success, our success at United Way also depends on our partners in this work. So first, I'd like to thank our core partners. I'd like to give a shout out to all of our collaboratives who are focused on addressing housing challenges for core families, and in particular, the housing providers who are our leaders in these collaboratives. So Housing Hope, YWCA, Interfaith Association of Northwest Washington, Domestic Violence Services, and Everett Gospel Mission. So United Way of Snohomish County, for those who are unfamiliar, is a convener, funder, and capacity builder. With these core partners, we are focused on identifying barriers and the arduous work of systems change. Together, we are all doing that hard work. So finally, this work would also not be possible without our corporate partners. They're more than just sponsors for an event. They are active in this work with us. So please help me recognize them. Our presenting sponsor, Premera. Our premier sponsors, BECU and People's Bank. Our media sponsor, King 5. Our gold sponsors, Jamco and Puget Sound Energy. Our silver sponsors, Perti Inc., Advanced Traffic Products, IAM 751, Keysight Technologies, and Western Systems. Our bronze sponsors, BNSF Railway, Cooper Family Foundation, Pacific Crest Savings Bank, Sound Credit Union, Coastal Community Bank, and Pace Engineering. And our partners, Community Health Plan of Washington, Fairfax Behavioral Health, and Sargento Foods and Union Bank. Thank you again for making this event and our work in our collaboratives possible. So this pandemic for me personally has genuinely opened my eyes to the traps and cycles of poverty as it relates to housing. I sit here in a formerly redlined area of Mukilteo in a house that, thanks to the generational equity built by my great-grandparents and the elimination of redlining, I get to live here at a third of the cost of renting an apartment. My unemployment during this pandemic left me incomeless for 4 months, where had I been renting an apartment, I would have found myself broken homeless before my unemployment income started coming through. But luckily, the equity and resources that my great-grandparents were able to amass in their lives protected me from falling into the traps and cycles of poverty that we work towards eliminating here at United Way. The lack of affordable housing is a crisis that affects everyone. And in recent years, that crisis has been heightened. The lack of affordable housing is a crisis that affects everyone. In recent years of heightened collective awareness and systemic racism and generational inequality that contribute to this crisis. When we look at how land has been stolen, colonized, redlined, purchased, and sold in our county, it's not a shock that we have amassed such a housing problem that leaves 3,800 children homeless on any given day. Homelessness puts these students at risk for chronic absence and therefore lower chances for success at school. For the families of these students, extraordinary effort is required to achieve success, similar to those who have consistent housing and regular school attendance. United Way's core collaborative, Improving School Attendance for Families in Transition, or ISA for short, helps to coordinate between families, schools, shelters, and other nonprofits to create supportive holistic systems for these families and helping them access the resources needed to thrive. We have over 100 families at 25 schools in Snohomish County that are engaged in this collaborative. At United Way, we believe that these collaborative solutions can focus on meeting the needs of both children and the adults in their lives to have the greatest potential for long-term success. Through our core work, we center families in the conversations and solutions while engaging our partners to address inequities in these systems. And with that, I am going to turn it back over to Megan Dunn so we can get this conversation started.
Thank you, Nicole. I am proud to be here today supporting United Way of Snohomish County, and I want to take a moment to thank you and your team on behalf of the community for the work that you are doing. And thank you so much for sharing more of your background today. So now I'm going to introduce Chris Collier from Housing Authority of Snohomish County, or HASCO. Chris is an affordable housing specialist for 12 municipalities, Snohomish County, and the Housing Affordability, or Housing Authority of Snohomish County. Chris serves as an issue expert for cities and city projects and advisory panels related to housing with the goal of supporting local responses to the housing affordability crisis. He regularly presents to city councils, commissions, to city staff, nonprofits, and community organizations. So we're really lucky to have him today. He can also offer dating advice on which job makes the best match to afford the house or apartment for your lifestyle. Chris conducts research and he synthesizes data sources, providing housing affordability data from federal, state, and local sources. His wheelhouse includes data analysis, technical expertise, and education or outreach. He advises municipal staff on next steps and addressing their housing needs, best practices, and regional issues. And he was responsible for the creation of a $655,000 AHA Housing Trust Fund in 2018. So Chris, the virtual floor is yours.
All right, well, thank you very much, Council President Megan Dunn, if I got that right. And thank you all for the introduction, the invitation to be here. I'll get right to the point where I'm providing the background to what is going to come later in the day. What is going on in Snohomish County that validates your own personal experience, that validates what you heard from Nicole, what validates the experiences and conversations you see in the county council and city councils across the county and the region, and your own, again, your own family experiences. Do you know someone who's a renter? Do you know someone who's struggling to afford housing? This portion of the presentation is designed to provide that background. So I will get into the slides here, and I will get to the data. As Megan said, I tend to live in data, and this presentation really is the numbers behind our housing circumstances in Snohomish County. It really all starts with how many houses we have versus how many households have been created. In 2003, we built 1,106 more housing units more than new households were created in that same year. So you don't demolish a unsold or unrented housing unit that from 2003 and 2004. This surplus, this annual surplus, adds up over time, year by year, and you get this. This blue bar is the total surplus. If we start counting in the year 2000, this is our total surplus of housing stock relative to new household creation in Snohomish County. And I can take this data back to 1980. Doesn't matter when I start counting at zero, that 2015, 2016, 17, 18, 19, we run out of housing. We're out. We've never seen that before, to the extent that by 2021, we are within, margin of error territory on how much housing stock we have. And you don't have to just take my word for it. Look at the Northwest Multiple Listing Service, where they report we have less than 1/2 a month of housing inventory, which means that if we stopped putting homes on the market today, we would be out of all homes to sell within less than half a month. A healthy figure should be 6 months. We are desperately short of housing, and this data reflects it. And so, as you'd expect, Economics 101 says a scarcity of a good means that the price for that good will go up due to competition. And that's true. This brown line is the inflation-adjusted median sale price for a single-family detached home in Snohomish County from 2000 to 2021. Has risen by well over $300,000, again, adjusting for inflation. Now, most home purchases still are not made all cash. They require bank financing. So what do you need? What are your household particulars? What do you need to make as a household to get that bank loan? Given typical loan terms across the bottom, 3.5% interest, a 30-year loan term. You put 10% down on that $682,000 home. The bank requires no more than 26% of your income go to your monthly mortgage expenses, real property and insurance figures, property tax and insurance figures, and no other household debt, no student loans, car payments, medical bills, credit card bills, things you can get sent to collections for. With those considerations, what do you need to make to get that loan from a bank? This yellow line, $157,000 is the required household income given these loan terms that you need to make to get a loan on that $682,000 house. Now, if we know what the required income is, the next logical question is, what is the actual median income for a household in Snohomish County? And the answer is not enough. This purple line is the census reported median household income in Snohomish County to the most current year we have data. And actually 2020 just came out, so that's not on this slide. But that's kind of irrelevant because I don't think that income has increased to keep pace with the required income. We definitely read about it if that had happened. And this is really where the problem starts. This is single family detached home ownership and how far away that's running from your median household. Now, if you're not owning single family detached home, you're probably renting. And so you're looking at a townhome or condo, and if you're not doing that, you're looking at renting. This green line is the average rent across studios, 1 beds, 2 beds, 3s, and 4s, just laid on top of the graph so you can see the proportionality, how it's changed relative to actual household income. That it's risen by over 40% since 2014. Again, all of this is adjusted for inflation. Looking today, or last month, I should say, at actual advertised rents on apartments.com, the advertised average rent across a studio to 3-bedroom apartment was $2,080 a month. That's advertised in Snohomish County. So let's look a little deeper at what this actually means. Who can buy where? Across the bottom, you'll see the median income or the sale price in a city within the city limits, and then the required income over that city. Edmonds, Linwood. I'm speeding up a little bit. I know I took a little too long on the previous slide. So this is what it costs. $950,000 is the median sale price in the city of Mill Creek. Requires $212,000 of household income to buy there. Mukilteo, Everett, Lake Stevens, and the city of Snohomish. Right away, you see that no city in southwest Snohomish County sells for less than $550,000, single family detached. So this is the first half of the slide, sale price and required income. Next half is who makes what. Looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which covers Snohomish, King, and Pierce County, I'm looking at 4 different occupations just selected to give you an example of who we're talking about here. I'm looking at 25th percentile, 50th percentile, 75th percentile of income. That's in the beginning, middle, and end of your career. A physicist in the Puget Sound region makes $108,000 to $182,000 in their career. That's the median wage for that occupation. Remember, student loans aren't part of the required income calculation. They're not able to buy in these red shaded cities. Southwest Snohomish County is almost completely off limits for a physicist on a single income. Emergency management directors and administrative law judges. Stop and think for a second. If you call your parents, if your kids call you and someone says, Mom, Dad, I'm a judge. I've been appointed as a judge. Is your response going to be, I'm sorry that you can live only in a townhome or condominium in Southwest Snohomish County? No. Society and history states that if you're a judge, your ship has come in. The world is your oyster. You can live and do whatever you want, but that's no longer the case. Audiologists, a reminder that we need a lot of specialty occupations to make society run. And we might say, well, but those audiologists, they're fine. They can live in those 5 cities with townhomes and condominiums in their price range. The problem is 802 townhomes or condominiums sold in these cities combined in 2021, while at the same time, 435,500 workers in the Puget Sound region, King, Snohomish, and Pierce, have an income that would be appropriate for those units. That's a bit of a mismatch. When I was making this slide in 2021, I got really grumpy looking at these numbers, and I wondered to myself, how high do you have to go on the income scale to be able to afford it? The answer is you can't. That the highest median wage occupation in the Puget Sound region reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a dentist. Median and average is $204,000 to $207,000, cannot afford it in Mill Creek. A nurse anesthetist and an internal medicine physician, cannot afford the 3rd highest median wage occupation, cannot afford Edmonds. And this data is getting a little old. Things have changed since then. So this is truly an issue that reaches to the absolute highest in society. It's not an issue of poverty. It is an issue that truly is affecting everybody directly. That if you're advising someone on what occupation they should go into so that they can live wherever they want to, the answer is be a dentist and have supplementary income. Because on a single income, you can't live in Mill Creek. Edmonds by now might be out of reach. So looking at just how much things have changed at single family detached homes by city, I'm looking at every city across the bottom. And 2000 to 2004, how did the price change for single family detached homes in Arlington? They changed a little over 10%, 10% up in that 5-year period. 2005 to 2009 in Arlington, just a sliver more. Other cities, way more. Mill Creek, the recession hits Mill Creek early. Prices actually fall in that 5-year period in the city of Mill Creek. The recession really hits everybody in 2010 to 2014. Prices fall dramatically countywide. But then the recovery, 2015 to 2019, and then just the last 2 years. So let me back up. Here's 15 years of price change data. Here's the last 7. The point of this slide is that things have fundamentally changed in Snohomish County's housing history, and that we need to recognize that things are different now. This is not more of the same from the beginning of the 2000s, the century. And here's the net change. If you want to take away one number from this, look at this net change value. Darrington, 101% change from 2000. A home in the town of Darrington is now 101% more expensive after you adjust for inflation than it was in the year 2000. What sells for less than $400,000? Chris, I just want a place that I can afford. Just tell me where I can find affordability. I'll buy a single family home, a townhome, or condominium. Again, looking city by city, let's look at inflation adjusted. How many homes sold for less than $400,000? About 90%. Countywide, depending on the city, sold for, of all sales, were for under $400,000 in today's value. The next 5 years, the next 5, the next 5, and the last 2. The point being, pick out Everett, tallest column there, 90% in the first 5 years, 32% in just the last 2. I can peek into the future by setting this value to $200,000. How many homes have sold for less than $200,000? By 2018, we basically have no $200,000 home sales in Snohomish County. That is the future for $400,000 home sales a year or 2 from now. These percentages will go down. They will not go up. And here in the insert is all of Snohomish County. 15% of all home sales in the last 2 years have been for less than $400,000. Let's try renting. Closing in on the end of my presentation. Rent has risen by 53% from 2000 to 2021. Income, 2000 to 2019, 9%. You don't have to just take my word for it. Citing a Herald article from last year, a renter household saw their rent increase by $475 a month, and they were economically evicted from their home because they couldn't pay the rent. If you rent today, as I said, the average county rent is $2,080 a month. Knowing the square footage of those listed rentals, that's $2.30 to $2.60 a square foot. If you bought a single family detached home in 2021, when prices were bananas high, you're paying, your mortgage, given those loan terms, is $1.60 a square foot. So just look at those numbers for a second and remember, if you sell that house, you get your equity back. If you're renting and you leave, you get nothing. You are paying more for less that you don't get back as a renter. Renters are in deep trouble and their rent is rising faster than income. Home ownership is getting further away. Renters are trapped in a bad situation. 38% of the Puget Sound region's workforce cannot affordably pay more than $11.50 a month in rent. What that translates to is 689,000 full-time workers in the Puget Sound region. That's their affordability limit, above which they become what's called cost burdened, where more than 30% of their income a month goes to housing expenses. And practically speaking, they'll be severely cost burdened, paying 50 or 60% of their monthly income to rent, just to have shelter. The point that I mention here is that if you go on Craigslist and you look for a deal, you might find one. That's great, but there's 689,000 workers who are also looking for that deal. A few deals are not going to fix this. We have a systems problem. What this means for affordable housing, the last slide of data, housing choice vouchers, what you might know them as Section 8, were supposed to be temporary. Now they're often permanent. 75% of the Housing Authority's voucher portfolio is senior, disabled, or both. And they, practically speaking, do not have the future income potential to compete in the private market, and they will never leave the program. That probably is part of the reason why it's now a 7 to 10 year wait for a housing choice voucher. It's probably also why the time to lease once you have got to the front of that 7 to 10 year line, the time to lease is now 62 days, up from 55 in 2019. And the success rate is down 4% in the same time period. You got to the front of the line after hanging on for 7 to 10 years. Now there's a 19% chance that you will not successfully utilize your voucher. Last piece of data, I really promise. Here's the number of very low income households in Snohomish County in 2019. 77,000. That's your household income of 55,350, household size of 3. Means we have 77,000 households. So of that pie, how many households do we cover? The Housing Authority can cover about 8% between their income restricted units and the vouchers from the federal government that they have to administer. The Everett Housing Authority covers another 3,600. Other non-Housing Authority affiliated income restricted units is about 14%, or 10,733. And that's it. We leave 73% of our 2019 very low income households without assistance, a 3-to-1 mismatch in 2019, after which things got a little worse. The point that what I've tried to illustrate with this presentation is that we're on a housing continuum. I started talking about home ownership, then I talked about market rate rental housing, and then its downstream impacts on restricted rental housing. And you can see how this would continue on down through the system to homelessness. I'm painting the picture of a Newton's cradle that's getting pressure applied to it constantly from only one end. And as a Newton's cradle, you will see the impacts of that at the other extreme, as Alan and Mary will talk about after I'm done with 2 more slides. Why doesn't someone do something? This quote from Harvard economist Ed Glazer really lays it out, that the greatest challenge facing attempts to loosen local housing restrictions is that existing homeowners, people that are in a house now, like it when their house costs more. They don't want the house value to come down, because then you as a homeowner have lost value. You want that value to go up, but that puts it out of reach for more and more people. And furthermore, who is going to tell homeowners to think differently? Who is in charge of housing? Is it the feds? No. HUD administers Section 8 grants and so on. The state doesn't do it. The county and the local cities are very, very close to the homeowners and find it impossible to really substantially make the systems change. We are in an echo chamber and we just keep on going around in circles. So a couple takeaways before I hand it off to Mary and Alan. Snohomish County is in a new chapter of its housing history. From 2015 to the present, something is different, and we need to recognize that as we move forward. That a failure to act leads to a breakdown in services. If you have made the mistake of taking a ferry recently and been caught in a 3-hour backup because they're on one boat service with, as I have, a 4-year-old in the car climbing all over you, that's why. A deckhand on the ferries starts at about $43,000 a year. It's a little hard to attract workers to that occupation. Now, it is an issue of pay, but more than that, it's an issue of cost of living. If you raise the salary of ferry workers to attract more, that's great for ferry workers. That just means that they can outcompete somebody else. Say nothing about contributing to our global problems like climate change, as we'll talk about later, about longer and longer single occupancy vehicle trips from Granite Falls, Darrington. Renters, as I mentioned, are trapped in apartments and they're falling further behind. Social programs are critical, but are a never-ending problem until the systems issue is addressed. And this is not a a bubble. San Francisco is yet more expensive. We can tolerate this as a society. We can endure this pain unless we choose intentionally to address it. This new chapter in society means that each of us, individually, cities, as a society, as a region, must think differently. We have to break out of this circular echo chamber and schooling behavior that we're in, and we must think differently and address this issue. So, conclusion and questions, and I will hand it off to Mary and Alan. Or no, excuse me, I have questions, don't I?
Yeah, I think we only have time for one quick question. Chris, because no, it's fine, because you provide such wonderful information. We really want people who work here to live here, and there's not enough dentists to go around for all of us to marry or live with. So what is this telling us in 30 seconds or less?
This is telling us that our system is not working and that society will continue to struggle. If you think about your particular issue, if you care particularly about education, about healthcare, about social equity, housing underlies all of that. How successful can you be in healthcare reform and education reform or improvement without changing housing along with it? How effective is your healthcare if your outpatient treatment is under a bridge? It just doesn't work. And so that really fundamentally is the message. What it's telling us is that housing has changed and it's taking all of our other issues with it.
Well, thank you, Chris. We really appreciate your insights. Mm-hmm. So next we're going to turn it over to Mary Faye Cruz. So it's my pleasure to turn our focus to the great work that's being done by United Way of Snohomish County and their core partners. So I'm pleased to introduce Mary Faye Cruz, who's the Director of Operations at United Way of Snohomish County. She leads the organization's impact, investment, and equity work. Molly has a background in youth and family services, community engagement, and organizational development. She has a master's of social work with a focus on social change and innovation from the University of Southern California. Molly?
Thanks, Megan. So United Way of Snohomish County and our core partners don't shy away from tackling the difficult issues. Housing is certainly one of those. Like Chris said, it is interconnected. It's underlying everything that we do. To try to work on this, CORE brings together over 100 partners to meet the needs of families, especially with young kids living in poverty in our county. To support families with housing, that means providing a whole range of supports for families experiencing homelessness and whose housing is in crisis, referrals, resources, rental assistance, emergency shelter, move-in costs, just to name a few. But we don't stop there because all of those needs are just symptoms of a bigger problem, and there's really a limit to how much impact these crisis supports can make. There are so many roadblocks in our system. There are only about 100 shelter beds in our county that are available for families. So referral to a shelter is useful, but only if one of those beds is open. So how do we keep families in their homes and prevent them from needing emergency shelter? Typically supports like rental assistance, but connection to rental assistance might not be helpful when the wait list is thousands of households, or there may not be a wait list to be added to at all. Like Chris mentioned, voucher wait lists are 7+ years. To kind of navigate around this, often our core collaboratives provide assistance directly to families to avoid them getting stuck in these long wait lists and these bogged down systems. For some families, that's great. A one-time, rental assistance check can be a perfect fix if someone needs temporary support. But most likely, it is not going to be a one-time issue. What if it's a family who can't afford their apartment in the first place? They use that 1 or 2 months of assistance and they are left in the same position. They may not even be able to get into stable housing at all. So 43% of the families that we work with have no income, and 70 have income of less than $15,000 a year. So not even close to the incomes that Chris was talking about for folks who are renting. Housing is really not an issue that we're going to solve just looking at one piece of the puzzle. We could pour unlimited resources into crisis supports, and still household after household would continue to join waitlists and families would continue to be displaced from their communities. That should be a really big red flag for all of us, that resources alone are not going to solve this. So our core collaboratives work on 3 levels: intervene to support families in crisis, prevent families from being in crisis, and resolve the issue on a large enough scale that neither intervention or prevention are necessary anymore. North County's Community Collaborative, Mary and Alan, who are going to join us for the panel, they're up in Darrington. They are a fantastic example of this approach to intervene, prevent, and resolve. While they support families directly, they've recognized as a collaborative that there needs to be bigger changes to impact the entire community, make it an affordable place to live, and be able to keep their community together. As a small rural town, they're definitely feeling the squeeze of that very low housing inventory that Chris was talking about. What do you do when you're trying to get a family into housing and it just doesn't exist? There's nothing available. You have to have affordability, accessibility, availability, all happening all at once. And that doesn't happen for most of us, in this housing market. They have started to work on housing as a community-wide issue, housing affordability. They have been working with Chris to learn more about the issue and start taking action. So I'm really excited to hear from them about their work. CORE is work that none of us can do alone. It is built on our shared vision, dedication, and resources. And I'm really grateful for our panelists as fantastic partners, and their organization are really integral in making this work successful. So joining us today for our panel is going to be Alan Picard of North County's Family Services, Mary Wysocki, North County's Community Collaborative, and Chris Collier is coming back to join us for our panel discussion. So welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here and sharing your expertise and your insights with us today. Let's jump in. So I'm going to throw this first question to you, Alan. Give us a little bit of insight into what housing needs you all are seeing in your work with families.
Well, thank you, Molly. And it has to be said first that we could not do the work that we're doing without the support of United Way. So we are very grateful for that. So in the inception of NCCC, housing was not identified. We didn't create NCCC to deal with housing. The partners at the table thought that it was really important, mandatory, that the families that we would be serving would be sitting at the table with us, and that they would be really driving the boat and telling us what their needs are, what their obstacles and hurdles are. And there were several things that always rose to the top, and housing was the biggest concern, and transportation. And we first started the transportation initiative, and while it may not sound monumental, it was a great victory to be able to work with other partners to have community transit broaden the times of they only come to Darrington twice, once in the morning and once in the evening, but you weren't able to work an 8-hour day if you were working in Arlington. So that's been changed. It took a few months, but it was one of our first victories as a collaborative. And then the housing thing kept coming back, and it seemed so huge, and it is huge. We didn't know where to start, how to wrap our arms around the issue of housing. And Mary had heard of Chris, and it's like, all right, great. We're first going to start with educating ourselves. And as you watch Chris's great presentation, it's brilliant and yet discouraging and even depressing, but it gave us information that we needed. Right now in Darrington, I don't know that you can find much for sale for housing that does not have a 400,000 in front of it. There are 2 multifamily facilities. One is for disabled and elderly, and one is somehow was allowed to be built years ago. It's new. It can be a divisive issue, and the solutions may be scary, but the town definitely needs multifamily housing. There's a lot of adult kids that are living with families. Most of the families that we serve are multi-generational in one home, because there aren't that many alternatives. A 1,600 square foot house in Darrington right now is being rented by one of the families that we're serving, and their rent is $2,000 a month. And you have 3 adults from different families, backgrounds, trying to pay the rent. And the motel where we have to use emergency lodging is $1,250 a month. So if you have a place to sell and you have the cash to buy, then you might be in a good place. If you don't, the division of wealth grows larger and larger with this crisis.
Absolutely. You know, you've said before that families are being forced out of the school district, and, you know, there's a lot of changes of families who, you know, thought of Darrington as an affordable place. It was one of the places where if you needed to move out of Everett to be able to afford, you could go to. And now, you know, it's a place that people are getting priced out of also.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. We have had that issue. Darrington School District is maybe 440 kids K-12, and when a family leaves, it makes a big dent in the budget. Aside from what it does to the added trauma of poverty to those kiddos when they have to relocate and have new teachers and have new friends. So there were several families this school year so far whose landlords decided to take advantage of the crazy sales prices and sold their properties, and there was no place for them to rent, and they had to leave the district and leave their support system. And it's not good for the school district. It's not good for Darrington, but it's terrible for kids.
Absolutely. So, Mary, let me pass it to you. Give us some examples of what NCCC has been doing to get into, you know, working on this issue.
Thank you, Molly. So we started over a year ago, and the example we just talked about with the families that were displaced because the landlord sold their house was really disturbing for us. Darrington School District is one of our key partners. And when the superintendent shared that story, we were just like, wow, this is crazy. So we decided we needed to be educated. This is a huge issue. We really know nothing about it. Housing is a system, and that's one of the things that we focus on. So we contacted Chris, and Chris was able to come and give us some really good information. The information was depressing at times, but it gave us kind of a baseline understanding of what was going on, not just in Darrington, but countywide. So from there, after that took place, the collaborative sat down and had some really good discussions and said, this should be a priority. This is impacting our families, and this is important. So we just started to dig in a little deeper and started to engage more with Mayor Rankin and the town council in Darrington, and started just asking them a little bit more about their experience with the data and what they're seeing. We eventually were able to put together a workshop, a housing affordability workshop, and it included partnership with Darrington, the town of Darrington, Mayor Rankin, and then the Planning Commission, and Chris was, and then also community members. So Chris was able to come and provide information and data, and this workshop really allowed for us to all have a baseline of understanding of how big this issue is, and then also highlighting key focus areas that the community could focus on. And then also it allowed the community to give feedback to the leaders. So as a result of that, we now have several community members and our collaborative partners that are attending the Planning Commission meetings and also Town Council, and also just kind of giving feedback. Right now, Darrington, the town of Darrington is updating the comprehensive plan. And a comprehensive plan is something that is done by every city and town across the state. And it's updated every 7 to 10 years. And it really is the roadmap for what's going to happen in the community around land use, housing, and infrastructure. And in this plan, they rely upon public input and information coming from the community to kind of shape the priorities of what the future growth looks like for that community. So right now, Darrington is in the process of updating that. And so we are getting our partners and some of our community members and families involved in that process.
What a great example. And, like you said, there are windows that are especially important for feedback. If a plan runs for 7 to 10 years, this is a great time for, partners and families to jump in and provide input to that. So taking it away from Darrington for a minute and kind of talking countywide, this is obviously an issue that nonprofit partners and our education partners and families all need to be involved in, but are not going to be able to do alone. So, what kind of big picture changes would we need to see, would you like to see in our county that would support this? Alan, let me throw it to you first.
Yeah, I think that the most important thing is that we all are going to have to think outside of the box. I think that as much as a school district can, and the town can, and the county can, we all have to sit down at the table and realize what's happening and be honest about it, and be creative about it. The town of Taos, New Mexico, did a joint venture with their school district and the tribe and the town, because the teachers couldn't afford to live in Taos, and they ended up doing a really amazing housing units that were affordable and cool and close to town, and it gave the staff and everyone else the ability to have the same ability as other people who were able to purchase land in the town. So I think that it's bring your imagination, bring your creativity, because we can figure it out, but we've all got to sit down at the table before it's too late.
Absolutely. Mary, what would you add to that?
So I would totally agree with what Alan said, but I'd also just say that, start somewhere, be part of the solution. This impacts so many people. And so get involved.
Yeah. Chris, what, large scale, what do we need to see happen?
Well, so it's two things. It's keying off of what Mary and Alan said. It's show up and say it's okay. I have watched so many planning commission council meetings and other special meetings go south when it's really the only people that show up are there to say no. You need to show up and say yes, that it's okay, that take this message and put it in your own words and say it's good. We want this to be done. That is critical. I've worked in government for more than 5 years at the Alliance, and it's really critical to show up and be a positive voice, because typically what government hears is, oh, don't you dare. You do something different, and we're going to meaningfully sharpen our pitchfork at you. The other thing, when we talk about creativity and thinking outside the box, what you heard from Alan and Mary is that we have really what's behind their statements is we have a monoculture of housing. We have single family homes, we have apartments. What else do we have? We need something else. We need those middle steps. Here's a simple question for you, respecting our time. Where does a starter home in Snohomish County get built? Where? In what town, what geographic place, but also where in your city? Where in your city specifically does a starter home, the starter home for college or high school graduates with or without kids, get built? And also, where do seniors who don't want a 4-bedroom house with just the two of them downsize to? Where are those options in your community? And really, that is both a question to your leadership, your planning commission, and your council, but also it's a statement to them that it's okay for you to create or to permit those options. And that big picture is what we really need. It is big picture, but it requires everyone to do that individually on an individual scale.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I've heard you say that has stood out to me is if we don't provide those in-between options, those creative solutions, people will, out of necessity, find them, create them, but do it in dangerous and vulnerable ways. You know,
Yep.
we'll get people just having to make do with the solutions that they shouldn't be forced into.
Right. If you're doubling up out of necessity, you have two households living together, you create without, outside of the bounds of, legal support, you create opportunities for vulnerability. You create vulnerability, opportunities for exploitation, and really bad outcomes. That's not a good thing. And that's what's happening now is people struggle to figure it out, and that's not good.
Yeah. So our last question, what's kind of your one-liner takeaway that you want people to leave with today? Mary, let me throw it to you first.
Okay. So there is a lot of power in advocacy of our families in our communities, and Darrington Family Outreach is a local support. This is a support group, but also it consists of families that are in our program and parents that live there and they have small children, and they provide their lived experience to us. And through the process of building them up as a leadership group, there is power there. Our legislators and our local leaders and leaders don't want to hear just from us as providers and nonprofits. They want to hear from our local residents. So keep in mind that there's power in our advocacy with our families.
Chris, what's your takeaway for us today?
My takeaway is that everyone listening to this, live or recorded, all of you have an experience with shelter. You do. Regardless of what that shelter looks like, you have a valid experience with shelter, and therefore you have a valid voice to contribute to that. If we're talking rocket science, like not everyone's a rocket scientist, maybe your comments aren't super helpful. In housing, you have valid real world experience with shelter and what it can be and what we can do. And so your voice is valid and it's needed. As I mentioned earlier, we need to hear that positive voice saying, yes, please change. And more than that, when I show up to council, it's like, oh boy, it's Chris again. Let's get out the ice cream because this is going to be sad. If you're a doctor, if you are a service provider, if you're a teacher, if you're a bus driver, tell your story about how the housing affordability shortage has affected you and the people that you see and interact with every day. That different perspective really matters. It isn't just me then showing up and going crazy. It's everyone. It's society showing up and saying, from this angle, from that angle, from that angle, from this personal experience after personal experience, it is okay and it's good. So again, your voice really matters, and it's really just fundamentally, it's a question of creativity. Can we be creative enough in what we imagine shelter to be? Not a house, but shelter. What can we imagine that to be in a way that better serves our society? There's a lot of options out there. We just need to have the courage to do it.
Yeah. Alan, what's your closing takeaway for us?
Yeah, I think that it's really important that all of us in our organizations try to do what we're doing with DFO, Darrington Family Outreach, and foster and train new leaders for our communities and help them realize that, yeah, you are 25 or 35, but this is on you. How can we help you realize that you have the power? So I think there's a lot of responsibility on all of us to do that in our different organizations. And I what do I say? Get educated, get involved, and get creative.
Awesome.
Open the mind.
Thank you. So thank you all for joining us, for your insights, for the work that you do every day for our community. Housing is such a complex issue that we all need to get involved in. That's abundantly clear throughout this whole hour, that this is our issue collectively to address. Our core collaborators are really powerful partnerships, that are part of the solution and addressing it together. I'm really grateful to be doing this work alongside you three. So thank you so much. Megan, back to you.
Thank you, Molly. Well, this afternoon we've heard about the need for housing at all levels and that everyone should either have a home or we should be dating dentists. We've also heard about the opportunities for equity and collective impact and that it's really making a difference here in the county to remove barriers. We've also heard about what we can do so we can really rise to this challenge and be creative. So really appreciate the points from our panelists today. So our calls to action. Please subscribe to the Core Connections e-newsletter on the website to hear more about the work in the coming months. Also help us advocate to work in our community and also consider donating at uwsc.org. The link should be added in the chat. And we also want to thank our speakers today. So thank you to Nicole Amore for your leadership as the chair of the board of directors for United Way of Snohomish County. Thank you to Chris Collier. Your insight into the trends and needs of Snohomish County has absolutely been invaluable. And thank you to our own Molly Faye Cruz and your team for all of the support to our core collaborators. The process of shifting the conversation from single programs to collaborative cross-sector partnership is a very long process. So we also have a particular thank you to our panelists, Alan Packard and Mary Wysocki. We are all indebted to you for your work, supporting the core families and the community at large with your work. And thank you for our corporate partners. You are vital in the efforts of United Way of Snohomish County to support the community in this work. Finally, thank you to all of our individual contributors, people like you. Today's a great day to go to the website and make a contribution to United Way at uwsc.org. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us at info@uwsc.org. I know Chris has also been generous in the past for responding to emails if you have questions for him as well. And please join us for our next Getting to the Core conversation, which will be focused on transportation in Snohomish County. And thank you again for joining us today and sharing your lunch hour with us. Have a great day.